Time to start as we segue over to John and Rooven, but I want to say thank you everyone to joining us today for top 5 KM trends. This must be our 5th or 6th top 5 webinar now. So always happy and excited to do one of these. And today we have 2 KMI instructors, John Hovell and Rooven Pakkiri. And I think this is the first top 5 for them to be together, which is really exciting for us. Just to remind you that you can always go to KMI for more information on either our certification training or free webinars like this. You can go to the webinars section over here at the top of kminstitute.org and just come down to this section for all the latest webinar content, either what's coming up or what's been recently recorded. So do check that out for more free content. So, okay, let me hand it over to John and Rooven. And thank you, folks, for joining us today.
All right, Rooven, are we ready?
We are ready, sir. We are ready. And I'll just have a little upfront, minor, small apology to anybody from anyone who's been on one of my classes before. There may be a few of our fun and games that you've played at before. Just play dumb and play along. And I guess same goes for John's group if anyone's been with him before, I guess.
Yeah, I think some of this could be familiar, but yeah, I just tried to put it in chat. I think these are really fun, so I'm glad Eric does these. I think the whole intent for the next hour is I don't know, like, you know, everybody's dialing in from different countries and different time zones, but I think a lot of countries have these late night TV shows where they try to have some fun, and it's meant to be lighthearted and yes, you know, thoughtful and full of learning, but at the same time, I think we're trying to have a bit of a laugh, which you know, nowadays maybe is extra important. So yeah, Rooven and I've put a couple of planning sessions together. We've put some thought into what is his perspective on the top 5 knowledge management trends right now, whatever a trend is. And then I've put my thought. We've put them just like all of the other top 5 sessions. We're just going to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, sharing each of our thoughts, and then we'll do a couple of small group breakouts so that, frankly, you can agree or disagree or laugh or joke or whatever you want to do. Basically, share your own top 5 trends with whatever we shared. So I think with that, I will share my screen, and I think it's already open. And I think you're up first, Rooven. What is your number 5 knowledge management trend from your perspective?
Oh, I like this. It's a blank screen, so there's no problem.
It is.
Well, if I've done it correctly, it should be self-service. There we go.
There it is.
There we go. Okay, so, and I know we're going to keep this really punchy, so I'll just speak very quickly, and then if people have questions, go in the chat or come off mute, and, you know, we can have fun with it. So yep. If you think of I like to tell people to think of yourself as not one. Let's take John. Let's pick on John. There's not one John Hovell, actually. There's multiple John Hovells. There's John Hovell, the citizen. There's John Hovell, the consumer. There's John Hovell, the KMI instructor. There's John Hovell, digital John in Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. Each one of these is slightly different from each other. But we're in a world now where as that one John changes, it affects the other Johns. So if you think of John as consumer, for example, we as consumers are really getting used to what I call the Netflix effect. Okay, we get what we want, or the Prime effect, if you prefer. What we want when we want it on demand, self-service. And when we come into our work incarnation, we see a gap there. And so it's become a big trend now for companies to try and satisfy that demand from individuals to have what they want when they want. So if I took it to a business function like learning, instead of just saying, here are the training courses coming up, people will want now just-in-time learning, not just in case. What do I need today and where do I get it? And can I go as fast as I want to learn, not at a predetermined speed? Does that make sense, John?
Works for me, and it's I have to laugh because, again, trying to keep it lighthearted. It's a good thing I just became a chartered psychotherapist so that I can integrate all these different Johns into a single John.
You know what? That's a good point. We're probably going to find everyone's going to need to become qualified in those things to deal with their multiple personalities that we all have.
I know it's something I'm working on for sure, real life. Okay, so
stuff.
yep, good one. Yeah, I think my number five, and I'm so fortunate, blessed, privileged to have all these different knowledge management, organization development, diversity and inclusion clients that I tried to, like the other top fives, I tried not so much to sort of think about my own bias, but what I'm really seeing inside all these clients we're so lucky to work with. And I think number five on my list, so admittedly, it's not my one, two, or three, but I am hearing more and more people asking about virtual communities of practice as opposed to the, of course, in-person communities of practice. But is there anything different that needs to happen virtually? And I'm also, Chris Collison is talking about communities of purpose as opposed to communities of practice these days. So I snuck that in there as COPs as well, communities of purpose, if you want to Google that or talk about what would be the difference between community of practice, community of purpose. And then I think I snuck, I do this in all of my top fives. I try to, it's more like a top 10. I just put 2 for 5. I do think right up there, somewhat similar to communities of practice is, if there is such a thing where people are leaving organizations or engaging with the gig economy or working for different companies at the same time, I do really hear people talking about global talent, or as an employee, how can I earn a living working for multiple places? Or as an employer, as an organization, how can I now not just look in the local city, the local region that I'm in? How can I now find the best talent anywhere in the world that could then virtually support us from wherever they want to live anytime? So yeah, global talent, virtual communities of practice are probably similar but different. But number 5 for me. How about number 4? Rooven?
Well, I'm just gonna throw a little tuppence into the virtual COPs, because I think it's absolutely a growing trend. No question about that, because a virtual COP can do certain things that a typical, single systems based one can't do. So, or a physical COP. So it's worth thinking about that in terms of a different business need. Okay, cool. Number 4, and I guess some of our things are which is good, they're gonna feed each other as well. So that'll be quite interesting. So we now know, and the pandemic has accelerated that, but really we are already seeing studies that are showing us that the level of stress in work is going up and up and up. So employee well-being is a big, big issue. And I know, John, it's an area that you're quite focused on in terms of your skill sets. But when we talk about well-being, we often talk about diversity and inclusion in the workplace, etc., as we become a much more richer fabric of employees of different styles, of 5 generations in the workplace for the first time, etc. But also what I'm interested in is this concept of diversity of thought. Okay, we're now actively recruiting for people who think differently, see the world differently. So, in the finance sector here in the UK, particularly in London, they're actually hiring people with certain levels of autism, certain levels of Asperger's, because it turns out they're actually really brilliant in other areas and very, very highly skilled in precision, repeatable processes, spotting patterns, etc. So I think for me, this is another big area that we're gonna be seeing growing, is this idea that to anticipate the problems of the future, we need people who think differently in the organization. Over to you, John.
Yep, thank you. And I imagine mental health is probably buried in that bullet a little bit too. Yeah, mine is similar but different. So I think worth mentioning. Bridging disciplines is the words I put up here. And again, I really do see this where we're called in to do knowledge management work, and all of a sudden it's not pure knowledge management. There's some organization development or some organization design or diversity, equity, and inclusion work, or that CL stands for conversational leadership, which, oversimplified if you haven't heard about conversational leadership because it is so brand new. It often in reality is difficult conversations that otherwise wouldn't have happened. And so again, we're brought in to do knowledge management strategy or knowledge transfer, knowledge retention, and all of a sudden there is some difficult conversation that needs to be had. So are you able to help us with that? How would you do that? How would knowledge management help with that? So yeah, to me, it really is this trend. The other one that didn't quite fit on screen that I think won't surprise too many people is project management. I think there's a huge overlap between knowledge management, project management, especially for those that practice Agile and Scrum, where they literally have ceremonies called retrospects and after action reviews and things that have been knowledge management practices for a long time. So yeah, I'm putting that as a trend. I don't know where it's going to go, but for now, 2022, I am noticing that KM, OD, D&I, project management, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, risk management, quality management, these things are sort of all kind of coming together. But how about for your next one, Rooven?
Well, I'm just gonna pick on a few things from yours quickly, just to support, add a bit more onto that.
Yeah.
What you're speaking about chimes in perfectly with the ISO document, where at the end they literally go through all the business functions and talk about how KM services each one of them. The other piece I'd throw in there, would you consider ONA as part of the bridging disciplines piece?
I mean, to me, ONA is almost like a KM tool or a KM approach. But you're right. ONA, appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry is like its own discipline, but I kind of often think of it as a KM approach. So yeah, so many things are sort of bridging or trying to work together, I think.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. Right, on to my third one.
Yes.
So as I say, some of these kind of feed each other. So you've got COPs, and I'm talking about the creation, the shifting of workspaces into job tasks over job roles. So let me explain that. A community manager cannot come from outside that discipline. So if you had a community for engineers, you can't just hire in a community manager as a standard role and put them into an engineering community. The community manager has to be somebody from the engineering community. 1, to have credibility, 2, to understand the issues, and 3, to have the trust of their colleagues. So that means they've got a job as an engineer already, and then they're taking on this task of community management. And more we're going to see that in organizations. And if you think about this global talent that you spoke of in 5, again, these link together for me quite nicely. This idea that we're going to move away even eventually from the concept of employee, I believe, and we're going to have fast forming and fast assembling groups that come together to solve a business challenge or a business opportunity. And the constituents of that fast forming group, so you're coming together over the task, not about a job role. And the complexion of that group will be some employees, some customers, some suppliers, some partners, some consultants, but it's their skills that they can apply to the task in hand that pull them together for that execution. So I think more and more will be task-driven organizations as opposed to job role-driven, if that makes sense.
It does. Reminds me a lot of talent markets and knowledge markets being focused on tasks as opposed to exactly what you have, as opposed to a job title or a job role. We've got all these skilled people and we've got all these tasks. Throw away the job descriptions, throw away the hierarchy.
Exactly.
And how do you match up? Yeah.
And you can almost see the companies who do it first are going to have an edge, aren't they? I mean, they're going to have an edge over, because they're going to attract people who want to work that way. You know, none of us, you can't put all of our talents into just one box. That's just not fair of any human being, right? And most people feel undervalued in terms of utilizing their talent at work. If you move to a task-based model, you get so many more places you can play in, right? So you might be good at languages, so you can play on this project, but you actually might be really good at team leadership. So you can also play in that project, and you're not constrained by, as you say, your job title or your department. Exactly. Cool. Over to you, sir.
I wonder if that potentially fits in what I've got in my third too, which is maybe less about tasks. And
we didn't set this up, folks.
Just no, we really didn't. We really did these separately, and then talk about it. I really do see this. I really do see, and I put business transformation, KM strategy in business transformation. You could absolutely change business to organizational, so it does not have to be a for-profit type of organization. But yeah, this is in my top 3. I would say every client that we're so lucky to work with right now, they are trying to do some kind of foundational rethinking everything. Yes, it's digital automation or digital transformation. That's a big one. Business model transformation, rethinking how they make money, how they find clients. That's big. There's one that just popped up for me. I was on my first business travel 2 years to the day last week. And we got called into a meeting again as knowledge management practitioners. And they said, listen, we're going through a finance transformation. The way we're going to charge our clients, the way we're going to procure materials and work with our suppliers. We used to have Excel documents and full-time jobs. We're now automating all of that. We're going through a big finance transformation. We want to have a project manager to run the finance transformation. We want to have a change manager who's responsible for shifting hearts and minds and doing with the change management part of this finance transformation. They'd also like to have a knowledge manager at the same level as the project manager and the change manager to really drive this business transformation from KM having the table, KM, I don't know if that's a fair phrase or not. Yeah, KM strategy really being considered in addition to how do we do knowledge management across the whole organization? How do we do knowledge management on these major initiatives that are transforming the whole thing? Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think what it's almost like what I'm seeing, like I'm doing a lot of work with pharmaceuticals, and this is exactly the way it's working, is their business is going through such a major transformation that KM becomes the way in which to help them manage that process. So the KM strategy is born out of the business need. And that's great because KM has struggled historically to align itself with the business. Now that the business is saying, if we're going to change, like you say, John, most organizations are having to look at new revenue models because there's disruption everywhere, right? And we'll see that even in one of our hopefully our exercises today. And in order to deal with that disruption, that change, those different business goals, KM is becoming very much a hot topic now. More and more, it's the go-to place for helping us make sense of this.
Some kind of collaboration, working across silos, the pain that has been felt in the lack of integration across transformation, across, working across hierarchies. Yeah, I think KM is somewhat respected now and being called in, or at least I'm seeing it being called in.
I would challenge that a tad in that. I completely agree with you. What I am finding in the most interesting companies for me are the ones that are ditching the word KM and replacing. Yeah, you're picking that up as well. Yeah, like the continuous learning organization as an example. Yeah. Right. I love that. Right. I think it frees everybody to really be bold when you decide to park that word. Excuse me. Okay, my one, employee voice and empowerment. We're going to see that hopefully, as I say, in this little exercise in a second, if we're lucky. Again, it's what we're seeing in our incarnations as citizens, what we're seeing in our incarnations as consumers. You now know that, every time practically you buy something, you're getting an NPS survey sent back to you, right? And if you don't like something, you have so much power as a consumer now to affect that product, to affect that brand, and to form fast-forming groups. When you get into the company and you put on your company employee, you've lost a lot of that power. You've lost a lot of that voice. And so there's a trend now. Companies are realizing it's not just that we need to accommodate it because John's doing that as a consumer. Why do you think companies are accommodating it? There's a huge benefit, right, from Amazon et al. Getting our fast feedback. You get a fridge delivered and they want to know every aspect of that process. What did you like or not like? That's important data, allows them to fix it and retain you as a customer and upsell, cross-sell, and also just address issues fast. Well, imagine if you brought that, which we're going to try and do in a second, hopefully, into the company, right, and gave everybody a voice. Your feedback loops would be a lot faster and your decision-making would be a lot more accurate, right? So it's something that I think is going to be a growing, it's big already, and there are even dedicated apps for employee voice, but I think it's going to get bigger and bigger for sure.
I agree. I love that you use the phrase feedback loop because that's where my mind was headed to. And I think a difference I've noticed, the reason I would maybe agree that this is a trend, it's not true everywhere, but more and more organizations are doing those engagement surveys or employee voice or improving feedback loops and actually doing something about it. And like having meetings, discussing it, having broader, collaboration and taking action. And the action is actually seen and felt. It's not everywhere. Don't get me wrong. Don't let me overstate it, but I think there is a little bit of a trend to that. So those that know me will not be surprised that knowledge transfer, knowledge retention is on my list. It really is. I ran the numbers last night. I always like to do this before the CKM, the Certified Knowledge Manager class, or I always like to run the numbers. It's 62%. 62% of our current contracts are knowledge transfer, knowledge retention contracts. So it's a high number. It is still definitely a trend. I'd be remiss not to mention it. I'm hoping all the familiar names I see on the list here, I'm hoping you're getting a good giggle that how on John's list is that the number 2 trend? I can't wait to see what number 1 is, because yeah, it wouldn't have been surprising if that was my number 1. It just really is. It's the beauty of it now is for the last 5, 8, 10 years, it was all about retirements. And it still is. There is still quite a wave around the world of retirements happening, but it is so much more now. The great resignation or the great rethinking or whatever you're calling that, people not working for companies for more than 2 or 3 years anymore. And somebody inside the organization seeing that, feeling the pain and wanting to take action on. Nobody stays for more than 2, 3 years. I say nobody to exaggerate. So how do we hold on to unique and critical knowledge? How do we embrace people that are going to come and go very quickly and hold that in organizational learning, organizational memory, even though the people come and go? And yeah, that knowledge transfer, knowledge retention, those 14 different approaches we use for that are a trend. They're hot right now.
Absolutely support you on that. Again, ISO calls out knowledge flight as one of the key reasons for people embracing KM, for sure.
Are we ready for your drum roll? Ready for your number 1?
Okay, go for it.
Rooven's number 1 trend in knowledge management 2022 is
digital disruption. So love it, hate it, whatever you feel about it, you cannot ignore it. If we go from driverless cars to drones to AI to 3D printing, which now has moved on from printing objects to printing houses or bigger objects. As a student shared with me on the class, and I get as much from the students on these things as everybody knows something. You can now apparently, they're starting to print human organs with 3D printing, okay, which is just mind blowing, really. So this is, and if you think about it, just 3D printing as an example, think of all the associated supply chains that are going to be disrupted as a result of that technology, that capability in society. So I think digital disruption is unstoppable. It's everywhere, and its speed. We're in an exponential age, so the speed of disruption is increasing every year. Okay, so we're covering quantum periods in our working lifetime. So we can already look now and say 2022, 10 years from now, the whole world will be very, very different. And so consequently, you can't ignore it. And so it kind of feeds all of these other things, right? It kind of bleeds into all of these things because it affects employee well-being. Some people can't deal with this rate of change really well. Others can't wait for it and can lead in the organization. It affects strategy. And if you actually play it back through all of these, disruption, and by its very name, affects all of these. So I feel for most organizations now, like it or hate it, they can't ignore it. And it's great for us in KM because it's focusing minds, right? And it's like, they'll ask the question. This is the typical question a leader will ask a KM unit in an organization. How ready is the company for digital? We can put it in a more positive spin, digital transformation, if you like. How ready are we in the company? Who in the company can lead affected by this? And who are going to be our early adopters or second wavers as well? And being able to understand that is a great KM challenge and a great service KM can offer to the business if they can answer that question. So for me, yeah, absolutely, digital disruption goes to. Okay, over to you, sir. Drum roll to you.
I'd love it. Digital disruption. I would agree. I wish I didn't agree and we could have a debate, but I do. All right. Yes. My number one is, quite honestly,
Oh yeah.
work from home, return to the office. That one is just so ridiculously hot right now. I snuck in work out loud. Quite honestly, not as many people are calling it work out loud, but with my KM hat on, I wish I could call it work out loud. This idea of, are you in an office physically, or how often, how many days per week is what now I'm hearing. Are you starting to travel again? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe for some of you, we got enough people on the call now. Maybe some people have always been in the office the entire last 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
I won't be shocked by that. There's a few that I know that have been like that, but something about the knowledge management trend of, how do we get this informal, intangible knowledge, the stuff that we used to get walking between meetings or on informal, even though I was physically in an office, I somehow felt different to get on Teams or to get on Yammer or to get on WhatsApp and just chat with my colleagues. And we still do that, but somehow it feels different when I'm in my pajamas and I'm at home. And you know what I'm like, there's some kind of, I don't know if it's a culture shift or not, but just how does not intangible, tacit, informal knowledge flow when the entire environment is so different? And if there is something shifting in the pandemic right now, if we are, going back to office spaces or whatever is going to be different here in the next year or 2 or 3, what does KM look like now that we've had this 2-3 year experience of a pandemic, plus some other realizations of systemic racism, of climate change, these things that are bigger than any one organization and are actually quite high priorities for a lot of organizations now. I think all of that leads to this. What does KM look like work from home? And the work out loud side, just to put a couple of words to that, is it's like the very beginnings of a trend. So admittedly, it's a stretch to put it as my number one, but I'm rooting for, are people willing to make this big transformation from, I take a task from my project manager, I go off quietly and work on it for a week or a month or a year, and then I come back and present this big progress that I've made, throwing that away, or maybe said more politely, as I'm working on things, as I'm struggling, as I'm making mistakes, sharing that struggle, sharing that, just like you think out loud, working out loud as I'm making progress, sharing that progress along the way in a broader, beyond my project team, into a broader, across the organization, maybe even beyond the organization. I think I'm just barely beginning to see more and more people, especially knowledge management practitioners, that are looking to do more work out loud type of practices.
So I want to come in on that because I think those are two, like you say, you've kind of sometimes cheated and put 2 in for 1.
Yes,
I'm gonna park the work from home thing. I'm totally with you and excited about work out loud. And I have to give you some genuine credit for introducing Miro into our mix, which when I first started it, when you first introduced me to it, I was like, okay, it's a nice tool and everything else, as you often are, and now I'm thinking like, okay, now I've got another problem. How do I work this into the class? Honestly, it has transformed everything because it's exactly what you say. It is this exciting thing. And I often say to classes, to different groups in the class, there's nothing wrong with looking at the other class's board while you're working on your problem, right? It's the Picasso rule, right? Great artists steal, right? Only average artists borrow. The idea that you can suddenly see, and it fits again with the fast-forming groups, right? Suddenly you're solving problems globally 24/7. I might wake up in the morning, check the work out loud space, and some guy in another time zone or person in another time zone has just put a blinding insight or a post-it note against my theory with an interesting add-on. How else are you gonna leverage the collective knowledge of the organization fast? You're really firing that network up when you start to get into a work out loud mode. And I absolutely believe, it's interesting because since we started, as was often happens with KM, more and more people start telling you stories that they've done this in this area or done it in that area. But innovation, brainstorming, problem solving, you know, even the big global issues that we're looking at in terms of, you know, sustainability, climate change, working out loud makes so much sense, right? It's too risky to go the other way if you think about it, John. It's too risky to just put it to a set of group of so-called experts, and it's too risky to not include somebody because you're asking everyone to go off on their own and work who actually's got a blinding idea that just didn't know you guys were working on the problem. As soon as you put it out loud, I will peruse the boards and see a problem that I wasn't actually focused on, but now that I see the problem, I see the solution, right? That's incredibly valuable for us as a society, let alone as an organization.
It
At that
reminds
level.
me of, love it. And it makes me think about, it didn't make it to our top 5 or top 10 between the two of us. Maybe, just maybe, the world is beginning to look at collaborative advantage, either as opposed to competitive advantage, or you can never say getting rid of competitive advantage. There's always going to be markets and
or as a way of delivering
share,
competitive advantage, right?
I really think, yeah, collaborative advantage is slowly gaining some credit. So normally we would go into breakouts now, but I think Rooven, you've got this fun idea of like a little exercise to try.
Yeah,
right
just
now, right?
a quick 30-seconder, and then we can go to the breakout. So fire up this. So you're going to see a picture, everybody, and John's going to launch a poll, and this is kind of walk the talk, if you like. So here is a picture of a drone delivering pizza. Okay, and all I want you to do is go with your gut emotion when you see this image. How do you feel? Do you feel positive, negative, neutral? Just go with your gut. It's anonymous, so we have no idea who's answering what, but we just want you to answer as quick as you can to show you something about these things that we're talking about: self-service, employee voice. Here's employee voice happening right in front of us. Imagine we're all at one company. We all work for the same company, and John and our boss, our CEO, said, John, Rooven, I want you to find out how ready is this company for digital disruption, right? Because nobody knows, right? Well, at least we have a starter here, okay? We can see that when we look at this picture here, and the key observation, by the way, and jump in anyone if you can see it ahead of me, okay? What is this telling you? So first of all, and have you shared it with everybody? I guess you have, right? So that's really, absolutely got to share the stuff. So it's a pulse survey. It's done in 45 seconds or less, okay? We share it with everybody, so our entire organization, all the players, all of you got equally empowered. You also can see what John and I can see, and you can therefore see the answer. We're going to go back to our CEO and say, we can say some things already to that question he asked us just in a 45-second exercise. That's the kind of power of if everybody collaborates. If you didn't all play, then we'll be in the dark guessing again, right?
And look at this, Rooven, it couldn't be better.
It couldn't be better. Go ahead.
Talk about a house divided. We've got 28 out of 35 people voted, and I think you can see the results on screen. We are almost a 3-way split.
Perfect.
We've got
and that's
43%. So I guess the winner is neutral, which is interesting. And then, yeah, 21% of people said they feel negative about this, about, pizzas being carried by a drone. And then 36% said they feel positive about pizza delivery.
Great. Now think of our two stakeholders. We've got our workforce, our tribe, I like to call it. Okay, we've included the tribe in this by sharing the results. Very important practice. But we've also got our chief, our leader, right? And John and I can go back to the leader and say exactly what John said. Let's call our leader Sarah, right? Sarah, we got some good news and some not so good news, okay? The first thing is we're a divided tribe when it comes to digital transformation. The good news is we can tell you what the divisions are. And the next good news is if you give us some funding, we can go ahead, and what we would recommend to do is we'll start with the positives. We don't know why any of you answered the way you did, and that's the next line of inquiry, right? And we should probably focus on the positives because Sarah wants us to transform the company, right? So let's find out those positives. Let's isolate them. Let's ask them why they were positive. So we go to a deeper dive, and let's use them as change agents to win over the rest of the tribe, if that makes sense. And you can't ignore any of these groups, right? Because they're too big. Neutrals and negatives are too big on their own to be ignored, and we need to take the whole company with us. We can't leave people behind. That doesn't work. So just kind of showing you that principle in action. Okay.
And as we always do, so we'll go to breakouts here in a second, but Rooven and I, just like every top 5 we've ever done, it's ridiculous. I mean, if you ask me tomorrow, what is my top 5, it's going to be different. If you ask me, 2 weeks ago, it would have been different from this list. So, again, just like the late night TV shows where we're doing this to like spark thought and to see what you agree and disagree with. Just like all things knowledge management, it completely depends upon your context and what environment you're in. We did put, just to make sure everybody's familiar with the relatively new international standard for knowledge management, ISO 30401. So we wanted to have a reference there to say, okay, so maybe that's a bit of a trend in knowledge management, that there's an international standard, and maybe we're beginning to converge and share some definitions and some beliefs and some practices in KM. But we wanted to call out here, just so you can see it on screen, our top 5, each of our top 5s could be completely wrong for you. We're very aware of that. Just to say, you know, what is your company culture? What is your buy-in or your resistance for KM? What is the market threat or the opportunity if you're a for-profit organization? And then there were lots of things that I really wanted to sneak into my top 5, and they just didn't fit. So I wanted to, you know, put some things on here that were so close, but it just didn't quite make it for me. What else would you add, Rooven?
No, I think you did a really nice job there in explaining it. I mean, again, look at how these changes happening. ISO is one of those key things to helping us reach a tipping point. Another is big, you know, traditionally conservative with the small C organizations like Novartis, talking about, this is from the CEO, creating an unbossed culture. And look it up on YouTube. There's some great videos. They're sharing this stuff as well. They're putting it out there, saying that we want to get rid of this hierarchical way of looking at things and solving problems. We want to empower individuals. So if an individual wanted to run one of these polls, they should be free to do so and trusted to do so, right? They want to pick up very quickly. They don't need to go to a certain department that does polls and all that nonsense, right? They should be inspired and empowered. So yeah, for sure. I think these are good contextual things to look at. And, you know, everybody's 5 is going to different. I think that's where we're going to go next, really, to let you have a bit of fun.
That's the question we've got for you. So let me put you in groups of 5. I think will work pretty well. And I'll type the question in chat here as I'm about to open the rooms. The question is basically, what is your top 5 trends in KM? And let's do, I think we'll just do one round of breakout. So why don't we do like 12 minutes in a small group here, chatting about your top 5. And then we'll come back and talk about it as a group for a few minutes. So what's your top 5? Ready, set, go. Enjoy. Welcome back, Lena.
Thank you.
How was your room? Were people talking?
Well, I was thinking, for example, one, like I'm totally new to knowledge management. What I've seen, I have just 1 year working in, I don't know how to put this in a trend, but it's like something I've been struggling with, and it's to make the people share their knowledge. There are people that have a lot of expertise. They've been a lot of years in the company. When they go, like, the knowledge is lost. I feel like a need to capture that knowledge.
And everybody just came back, so I guess we've got a full group back in the room, and now we've just got, I don't know, 5 or 6 minutes left. If anybody wants to share their thoughts on the trends. Lena was just coming back from her room as we all got back and saying she wasn't sure if it was a trend or not, but some of you may have heard she's thinking encouragement and getting people to actually share their knowledge could be a trend or could be a challenge. But yeah,
I think that came up in our group as well. I think that most of the focus in our group was around either knowledge retention or knowledge transfer. There was a lot of that, but I think it was Zane, I hope I have that right, made an interesting comment. He talks about not just where to find knowledge, but helping people become comfortable in doing so. And I thought that was a really good point.
I see Zane's head nodding, so it must be.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute.
You're fine.
Yeah, and there was lots of great points. I think that we had a great conversation too, just talking about the different industries that we were in a little bit. And one of the points that was brought up by Steph was that, you know, he's in a smaller industry, and when you have somebody leave much smaller departments, it has a much more profound impact on an organization because all of that knowledge is gone. You know, it's really hard to have somebody with backup experience that can fill in and step in with that information. So really good point there too.
Yeah, I would say the larger the organization or department, the harder it is to hone in on the knowledge, especially if the same people have been doing the roles for an extended time, and getting them out of the fear of releasing that information, that it's a fear of the job role, challenges. That is something that, when you talk about the different ways that we have to blend our disciplines, that's one of the ones for us from change management to think about how people see their role being affected by sharing knowledge. And that's one of the reasons why people have hesitation in sharing knowledge. And it's something that I've had to definitely think through as I've been continuing to navigate a new area in regards to how to get them out of hoarding and into releasing information for the betterment of what we need to get done.
There's definitely
Great
multiple.
point.
Yeah, sorry, Rooven. Multiple generations that were brought up literally with the phrase "knowledge is power," and so
Yeah,
we've tried for years now in KM to say knowledge isn't power, knowledge shared is power. But I think that's still an uphill battle.
Well, first of all, thank you all I have a very wonderful conversation. My name is Clara. And one of the funny things I'm always in this session is that I'm in Latin America, and that's a whole different ballpark. You don't know the challenges we face when we get to people to talk about what they do. We still are in a very hierarchical industries, especially mine. And I didn't come from knowledge management. Actually, I'm learning. I come from risk management. And as you say, John, it was very insightful to understand the transitions between the roles, because the middle companies, as I call them in Latin America, are in need of knowledge processes and knowledge management, but CEOs still believe in the old-fashioned way of if information is not to be shared. So the challenging in here is very, very hard in some ways. So we talk about it in the little group. It was very nice. And one of the trends I want to share with you all in Latin America is there is this law that is going through CEPAL, because we work in the ONG industries, that there is a need that all organizations need to have knowledge management as a way to receive grants or funding. So it's interesting. So
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I forgot to tell that in the little group. So, but thank you very much for all the learning, and I hope to contact them.
Hi there, everyone. It's Hank here.
Hey, Hank.
John, Rooven. It's been a long time.
A long time, sir.
And,
I was trying to remember the last time we met. It was, I think, in Dubai.
It was in Kuwait.
Kuwait, that was it.
All right.
Long time ago, yeah.
All right, our top five, we're seeing a big push in Europe around the learning organization. A lot happening in that area there. And I think KM has a huge opportunity to play. LinkedIn with something which is very trendy at the moment called psychological safety. I think there's some really interesting opportunities there. There's the whole collaboration piece and working out loud. I think KM lost a big opportunity over COVID to really grab that. And I've been doing some research recently which shows we're actually getting worse at it. We're actually going into silos. We're going the opposite side. I think knowledge graphs, I think that's a bigger trend or a bigger push in the States. But again, that would be of interesting to find out what's Rooven, to get your views on that. That seems to be a trendy thing. And the last one was augmented virtual reality, AVR.
AR, VR. I'll put that in chat too. Yeah, great
The
ones.
knowledge graphs, yeah.
What have you seen for knowledge graphs, Rooven? Is that big in the UK?
I'm not sure what we mean by knowledge graphs. Are you talking about knowledge mapping, or are you talking about ONA? What are we talking about? Is something different?
I think it's more towards digital knowledge mapping, a bit like social network analysis, but it's now the kind of a smart, intelligent way of doing it.
And is it automated, or does it require a labor piece? Because that I have seen, they brought in a consultancy, because having the software is useless without the data, right? And the data is tacit, right? I can't easily see who you network with more frequently than others if we were in the same organization.
Yeah.
So they actually had to go around and interview people and then put that data into an O&A software to map it. Is that what you mean by knowledge graphs? Like who you connect with most often?
I'm starting to learn about it, I think, but it's a big push coming out of the States, which I'm seeing. So I'm happy to learn from that. Yeah.
I think I snuck it into the honorable mentions at the bottom. I think I put it in there because you're right. I do hear about it. I have one client. This is why I didn't put it in my top 5.
Exactly.
There's one client that's actually asked me about knowledge graphs.
Right.
And I don't think they actually heard it from the States. I think they heard about it in Europe. So yeah, it's everything you said, Hank. And Rooven, it's a relative, I mean, it's been around. You'll recognize when you see, like, Google it and look at the stuff they're doing. But yeah, it is kind of a blend between mind mapping, knowledge audits, social network analysis, organizational network analysis. It is kind of this blend. And yes, parts of it are automated, parts of it are, there's a tacit human piece to it. But yeah, but again, if you asked me, if we did our top 5 trends next year, I won't be surprised if knowledge graphs like all of a sudden take off.
All right, so that's me done. All right, thanks.
Love it. Thanks, Hank. And that probably takes us right to the top. So if anybody needs to drop.
I think Derek has his hand up.
Hand raised, yeah.
All right, go for it, Derek.
Yeah, I just wanted, I think it was Rooven that might have
hello,
mentioned
Derek.
it. Hi, Rooven, how are you?
Very good, sir.
Good to see you again.
Yes, good to see you.
Yeah, I think it was Rooven that you mentioned it in relation to continuous learning. Because when I started the course, I couldn't find much on knowledge management this side of the pond. Sorry, I'm in Ireland, folks. And found very little on knowledge management. So eventually found the KMI. But when I looked, I was on the course with Rooven. A lot of stuff that we're doing already falls into it. We have a trend analysis groups in the organization where issues are raised, discussed, and if they're then equivalent to a knowledge cafe or a squirrel, and then brought in further to the actual process. So if they're worth it. But so I think continuous learning is something that should be referred to more around the knowledge management, because I think that's what is recognized as an organ, at least as I said, on this side of the pond. And the only thing I would think of is that's really as was called out, is the working from home. Like in Ireland, there's new legislation going through where people are going to get the right to request to work from home. And while I'm in the office today, Rooven will tell you, this is my second time in the office in 2 years for work. Other time I was temporarily in doing bits and pieces, but predominantly working from home. So I think that's probably would be my thoughts.
Fantastic. Thank you, Derek.
Derek, yeah. Well, we're, I think, 2 minutes past, but yeah, I just want to make sure I say a big thank you for those that dialed in. Hope that was helpful. And Eric, I assume we'll do another top 5 in the next month or 2, yeah?
Hope so. I'm ready when you are.
All right. We'll find a topic.
Excellent. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Rooven, Lori, Brandon, Rocio.
Thank you, everyone.
Good to see you. See you next time.